Hello, everyone. Welcome to DEI, a podcast dedicated to discussing diversity, equity, and inclusion. My name is Kara Siet, and today we have Miss Calandrea Carter with us. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, that was correct. Yes.
Perfect. Just needed to double check. Miss Calandrea Carter is a storyteller. She is the 2024 White House HBCU Scholar, 2024 My HBCU Matters Scholar, and Business of TV, Film, Media, and Sports Entertainment Scholar. Ms. Carter specializes in communications, specifically in radio and television at Alabama State University. Ms. Carter enhances narrators, educates voices, and inspires populations with her work in media and communications. She is currently working as a social media business manager at Dove Physical Therapy. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Ms. Carter.
Thank you. That was a really good introduction. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. Do you mind to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and identity?
Okay, yes, I am from Alabama, born and raised, Montgomery, Alabama. And some things about my background. I am the eldest of seven children, so I have six younger siblings, which really, I think, made my identity because being the oldest, you always have this certain complex of like leadership and like mentorship and helping people and, inspiring to the people that's younger than you. So I think that would be a little bit about me, how I got into communications. Honestly, sweetie, I looked her up. She was like, I have a communications degree. And that was around 2020 when I was still in high school. And I was like, that sounds interesting. And my nearest HBCU, Alabama State University, had that. So that's what I pursued.
Ah, interesting. I can
Mhm.
imagine having six siblings because I have a brother and that's like a handful already.
Six siblings is a lot. I have a 10-year-old sister, a 9-year-old sister, then after that, six, five, and two. So
Dang.
it's a lot of them, and a
Yeah.
6-year-old younger brother as well. So you have the teenager with the attitudes and the kids who just try to run you around and work you out. So yeah.
And I know from this background and also doing a communications major, you probably interact with a lot of different populations. So what does DEI mean to you?
I feel like diversity and inclusion means a lot to me. You need people from every type of background in all different type of places to make sure that representation is there so that person has a voice. Everybody voice matters, so you don't want to take away from someone's voice. So having someone that represents someone else or a community, I think, is essential to society at large.
Right. And I know that you're currently interning at like Dove Physical Therapy. Are there any overlaps in the way your school, institutions, and social corporations like Dove set their policies for diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, Dove Physical Therapy is Black owned. So it is female owned, Black owned, and veteran owned. So I would believe that Dove Physical Therapy is very diverse and its company culture is very, I would say, positive. So I love working at Dove Physical Therapy as a social media business strategist. The owner really gives me the freedom to really dive into my creativity when I make or produce content. His name is Dr. Carter, and he really allows me to expand how I want to implement new things. I brought to him, I said, hey, let's use Google as a way to build our business and grow the business. And he was so open to it. So I implemented ways and codings to enhance our Google presence. So I would say Dove Physical Therapy is a very positive place that very much supports diversity and inclusion. As far as my institution, it is a historically Black college, and which is very diverse. It has every race there. So I would say I've been in diverse settings, my upbringing, very diverse school. So I very much believe in that at large.
Lucky, I think we all want to be in a place where we're all included for sure.
Yes, I
And
agree.
yeah, in your role as social media business manager at Dove Physical Therapy, how do you ensure that the content you create is and manage is inclusive and targets a diverse range of people?
Great question. Great question. I believe the way that I manage social media and how it targets everybody. I believe with Dove Physical Therapy, we treat lymphedema, which really is a serious condition that I have to make sure that when I am strategizing on how to create content and produce it to everybody, that with the analytics that it's broad. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me see how I can explain this. When you have patients with like lymphedema or stroke or cancer, you want to make sure that it is diverse because you want to hit everybody, including areas that may be under or communities that may be or misrepresented within that lane of healthcare. So what I do to make sure the zip codes, I make sure the demographic I hit includes those communities and I don't exclude them. So that's how I would implement that in a social media business strategy type of way.
Got it. And I know you're also the White House HBCU scholar. What initiatives or projects have you been involved that kind of promotes equity and representation or opportunities for the HBCU community?
I believe with the White House initiative, which I can't really speak on it too much here, but with the White House initiative on HBCUs, it just makes sure we have educational equity at all HBCUs. So that's really the White House initiative, and I'm just honored to receive that award and recognition.
Mhm. Got it. Um, or I'm kind of curious about your communications experience. How do
Mhm.
you incorporate how do you balance the need for authentic representation with the expectations and demands of media and entertainment industries when you produce TVs or podcasts?
When producing TVs and podcasts, I think the main thing you want to make sure is that you're not neglecting one group and you don't have any bias to any group. You have to really have an open mind when you get into TV and film, and you cannot tell someone's story if you've never been through it. Or you can't just say, like, oh, I perceive this person to be like that, because that might not be their story or why they're in that situation at all when you're telling their story. So it's good to fact check and to make sure you go to the direct source. That's what I would recommend. So if I'm writing a story or I'm interviewing someone on a podcast, I would make sure I let them speak their truth and how they want to come across and how they want to tell their story. Because sometimes perception is a big thing. If people perceive someone's life a certain way or how they work a certain way, and it might not be what it is at all. So I would believe in going into things with no bias and making sure you allow the people that you want to engage with to tell their stories that's authentic to them. So yeah, that's what I would say for that.
Have you portrayed anybody or any person with have you done any stories that's impactful or has authentic representation of their voices that you would like to give examples of?
Yes. So when I did write on the Crown Act in Alabama, making sure we get that law passed so people can wear their natural hair in the workforce and it being illegal to fire them or not hire them because of their hair texture, I did make sure I told the story accurately to people who had different or textured hair. I know locks was a big thing, especially Black men in locks. Black men in locks, sometimes you really don't know how they feel because some men can feel like, I've heard a lot of Black men say, hey, I feel like my locks or my hair is unprofessional. I have to cut it off if I feel like I'm going to show up in the room as someone professional. That's some people's truth. But then you have another set of Black men who feel like their locks is who they are, and that's something that they're not willing to take away from themselves to get a job, and they deem themselves professional as they are with the locks. So when you have or approaching people to tell their story, I can't just say, oh, you have locks, you feel like you're unprofessional, or you feel like you're professional, because that might not be their truth. So I think when I wrote the story about the Crown Act and how some of the Black men felt about their locks, I did perceive it as, oh, I thought they were going to feel like it was unprofessional because that's what I heard a lot of other Black men felt. But they didn't. The ones that I interviewed for that article, they did not feel like that. They felt like their hair was professional. They were not going to cut it off. They show in a room. They just tie it back. They feel like, if you're wearing locks, just tie them back and you're good to go. So I had to make sure I accurately portrayed their truths as well. So I feel like that's the example of how I did that.
Right. Yeah, that's really important. And just to mention for the podcast audiences, the Crown Act Day was July 13th, which was a few weeks ago this month. Because I also wrote an article about it for Howard County Library, and I looked at your story written, and then I was really inspired by it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, because it's true. Like some people, they have different opinions about their hair. So you have to make sure you tell those as well because those stories are meant to be represented as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Also, what role do you believe social media platforms play in advancing DEI? As recently, there's been a lot of backlash on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what do you believe that how social media portrays it to the audience, and how do you leverage these platforms to create inclusive content?
Okay, great question. Okay, leveraging social media. I feel like it is a great platform. I feel like social media can be our best friend when it comes to this because it allows people to tell their stories directly. I know in the past, some media, it was highly produced. So it was being like the content was able to be edited, cut, spread misinformation. So I would say with social media in our hands and us having these platforms directly allows us to say, hey, this is my truth. And then correct, like immediately tell our audiences that follow us or keep up with us, hey, this is my truth. This is what I believe in. This is how I feel about this. And it takes away the misinformation or the misperceptions that society might have about minorities or diversity and inclusion.
Mm. And when you're creating TV shows or any entertainment related media, what is your goal that you wish to bring out to the audience?
Accurate representation. I know sometimes I watch shows, and as a Black person myself, I'm like, Black people don't act like that. Like, sometimes it's just like, what is this? Like, you know what I'm saying? And then even other races or other people who identify as other things, I feel like sometimes they can be misrepresented within the representation. Like, it's there, but is it accurate? And
Right.
sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you watch a television show and you're just like, I don't think that, represents me. That's not how I feel. Now, a show that I do resonate with well is All American Homecoming. I think that is a great show about HBCUs and what HBCU students and faculty go through. I can resonate with it. It's real impactful to me, and I feel like that's because the creators behind it represent me. It's diversity and it's inclusion there, and therefore we get accurate representation. And I think we just as a society need to keep pushing towards that, so we all feel that way. We all feel connected to the media that is portraying us at large. So that's how I feel about that.
Right. Yes. I totally can relate as an Asian, and sometimes it's not the way we're portrayed on the media.
Yes, I agree. I have a lot of Asian friends, and it was one Disney show. I'm not going to disclose the show, but they were just all telling me that's not, how we feel. And
Right.
that's important for it to be a large Asian group or base that has that true, accurate representation as well.
Right. It's all about just bringing us up there, right?
Yeah,
Um,
being accurate.
yeah. Also, as a final question, as a current student enrolled in university, what are some offerings you have to high school students who's mainly watching this podcast, currently working on attending college, and like trying to understand what major we should choose or what direction we should
Okay,
follow?
so that's a great question as well. The first thing I want to start with is don't let your ACT score define who you are. And don't let your top choice even define your success. I believe that sometimes, I know for me, ACT testing, which is like, I'm just not a good test taker. I'm very smart, just not a good test taker. And I feel like that's a lot for a lot of minority groups. And then also, some don't have the background to even get the training or help they need to even succeed with the ACT testing or SAT. So I would say don't let the scores define you. Make sure you have plentiful of options. And I would consider historical Black colleges as well. They have a lot of resources and a lot of groups targeted to those students or minorities that will give you those resources you need to succeed and be successful. So I would say doing your research as far as choosing a major. I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do in high school with communications, but when you actually get there, that's a little different because now I'm like, what are you going to do in communications, you know? So I feel like the first step is just identifying yourself and what your traits are and what you like doing. I like talking, I like being in front of a camera, I like writing. Those are three traits good for a communication major. And I would say identify what you like. If you like math, solving problems, a problem solver, I would say go into STEM and find something in that realm that you find that you'll see fit. So when it comes to picking a major, you have to really find and know yourself, which sounds easier than what it is, but really you have to dig deep. And I feel like that's more of an identity thing when picking your major because what you do is who you become, who you are. So you have to make sure that aligns with your personal goals, personal aspirations, and personal identity. So the help I would give to high school students is don't let your ACT define you. Don't let whatever college you get into define you or your assess, whether you get rejected or accepted. And also knowing your resources, knowing the routes you can go. HBCUs are an option. And just with that information, choosing what best fits for you. That's what I would
Great.
say.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is really good inspiration and advice for people in my stage right now.
Yeah, because the ACT score can stress you out. You're like,
Right.
oh my gosh. But like the school does not define your success. It's what you
Mhm.
do in college. It's what you make sure you strive for. And if you have that will, you're going to have a way. And the success will be there regardless of what school you attend. That's true
Right.
for the ACT score. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Ms. Carter. It is a pleasure
No
having
problem. I enjoyed. Thank you for having me. I feel honored.
you.
And that concludes today's episode on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Before we sign off, thank you for listening to Don't Erase My Identity. Stay tuned for next week's episode.